I think human beings have a natural desire for freedom, but I think one of the things that modern life does is it obscures what freedom actually looks like. So most people, their sense of freedom is almost a negative in that they know what freedom isn't. I mean, whatever your life is, you feel your job, your home, your relationships, you know that something's missing. So you know that freedom is somewhere else. You don't know where that somewhere else is, but you know it's not here. So it's got to be somewhere. A lot of this, I think, is fueled by the way social media and society in general talks about cities and places to live. It becomes almost the sense that freedom is defined by geography and where you are. Because the way people talk about cities now, it's not a city isn't seen as a place of people and a place for people to grow and connect. Cities are now just seen as products. You see these lists of like the best cities in America, and they're decided by, different kinds of attributes. This city is affordable. This city is walkable. Here's the weather, median income. So you end up with millions of people who are moving from city to city to places where they don't know anybody, where they have no connection, no roots. And what you end up with is kind of meaningless because freedom without connection leads to isolation. What you find when you move around enough is that real freedom is not just autonomy. It's not just the ability to get up and leave, because that freedom is what keeps you from actually connecting to a place, from making it part of yourself. You see this too with these digital nomad types, people who have like a work from home job and they just get up and move to Vietnam or, Thailand, Bali, wherever. The thing about being a digital nomad is that the place you're going to, you are just a consumer of that place. You're going there because the weather's nice and you get to sit on the beach. But you did nothing to make that place nice. All you're doing is bringing a little money to the economy. They did not notice when you got there, and in a few months you're going to leave, and they're still not going to notice because that place was not yours. You didn't actually belong. Freedom without belonging is not freedom. It's just moving around. I mean, we even kind of experienced this during the pandemic. If you were lucky enough in America to receive unemployment during the pandemic, for a lot of us, myself included, it was the first time we've ever really had financial freedom. You were just getting a check and just being at home. I think a lot of us had kind of a similar trajectory of it, where at first it felt unreal because finally we were free from the burden of work and we're just getting these checks deposited every week. But now, when you kind of look back at it, do you really remember any of that? Does it even did it make an impact in your head, in your memory of that, year and a half, 2 years? For a lot of people, I think the answer was no. Because that kind of freedom, financial freedom, without stakes, without connection, it leads to weightlessness. It leads to a feeling of just sort of floating from day to day. Time loses its shape because you lose, gravity. And time just goes by. It was, you come out of it and it wasn't all negative. It wasn't all positive. But I don't think any of us would call that freedom in particular. There's a lot of people in the last few years who are they're in vans. They bought a Sprinter van. It was called van life. This was a big thing on TikTok. People were buying these Sprinter vans and they spent thousands of dollars gutting the inside and adding like a bed and like a hot plate. And they were just showing these like slick videos of them driving across the country. It's like, oh, I quit my corporate job and I bought a van. Now I go to national parks. And they show themselves, driving through the desert. And there's all these people who are just giving each other tips about how to set up their van. And like, oh, you can go to a Walmart parking lot and here's how you save money. That trend, it felt like it was getting bigger and bigger, but then eventually it just kind of disappeared because most of those people went home eventually because they realized driving around in a van is not freedom. Because all the places you're going to, it's just a place to look at. It's not a place that actually needs you. It's not a place where you're contributing anything. And there's not a whole lot. Life does not get meaning from merely looking around. It gets old. I think the best way to think about freedom in terms of what it's not is thinking about punishment. Historically, one of the worst punishments that could ever be put upon you was exile. This is a concept we don't really have anymore because just the way countries are set up now. There's not like an outside of the country. You can't just send somebody away without having to put them in a different country, and nowhere else wants them. But this was how people used to get punished in kind of pre-modern times. You would get sent out. And that was seen as kind of worse than death because when you just remove somebody from a country, from their homeland, you're erasing their personal narrative. You still exist, but you have no more connection to your surroundings. So you're basically in a void. You mean nothing. Look at Socrates. When he's put on trial for impiety or whatever it was, he's found guilty and they give him the option of exile. It's like, we don't want you here in Greece, but you can leave. You can leave and never come back. His friends are trying to get them to come with them, to just, let's go live somewhere else. You can still be Socrates. But he chooses death. He chooses hemlock or whatever, because someone like Socrates knows that if he gets removed from his home, then his narrative is now erased. He now lives in a void. He would rather die and have that be the end of his story than simply fading away somewhere and people forgetting about him. Napoleon. The first time Napoleon loses, the European coalition comes together and defeats him. Napoleon was a madman. He was responsible for the deaths of millions, causes havoc in Europe. The Europeans, the coalition, they could have killed him. It's war. They would have been fully justified in killing Napoleon. But they know if they kill him, that he becomes a martyr. They can't put him in jail because if he's in jail, then now he's just a leader who's in jail. He becomes Mandela. So instead of that, they realize for someone like Napoleon, the worst punishment is exile. They send him to the island of Elba. It's him and his girlfriend and like his mother and like some servants. And here's the thing about the island of Elba. It's like a nice island. It's lush. It's in like the south of France. That's punishment for someone like Napoleon because he saw himself as one of the great men of history. So Napoleon is on Elba for like less than a year. And there are guards that are keeping him on Elba. But one night, in the middle of the night, he escapes, gets on a boat and escapes Elba. He could have gone anywhere. Napoleon could have gone to America. He could have gone to, India, somewhere in Africa. He chooses to go back to France from the exact place he got removed from because Napoleon knows that France is where he belongs. That's where his story is being told. So he lands back in France and he marches straight to Paris 100 days, and he takes back the crown. And, a year or so later, he ends up losing again. He goes to Waterloo, and now he's really defeated. But once again, the European powers, they know they can't just kill this guy. So they had to exile him a second time, this time even further away, to St. Helena or wherever. And this is like an even shittier island, and that's where he ends up dying of cancer. But the thing is, you got to think about it from Napoleon's standpoint, is that freedom for him would not have just been mere autonomy. He could have gone anywhere. Freedom is meaning. Freedom comes from connection and the story that you get to tell yourself in your head. Because the kind of freedom where you can just move around, real autonomy, that's not actually what you want. You think you want it when you don't have it, but when you get it, you realize that there is something missing. I think there are really there's a few different kinds of freedom. There are different levels of it, and I think depending on where you are in life, you want a different level of freedom, but you don't realize that there's a limitation to it. I mean, think about homeless people. The one thing I've never been homeless, but the one thing I always hear from homeless people, at least in America, is that there is just time in the day. When you go from living a regular life to being homeless, your day just expands. Because, most people aren't living hand to mouth. They're not literally starving. If you're in a city, you can get something to eat somewhere, a soup kitchen, food pantry or something. And then you're done eating and maybe you take a shower or something. But then the rest of the day, you got nothing. You're just out. Homeless people are almost experiencing a kind of exile, but even at home. They're not told, they don't have to leave the country, they don't have to leave the city. No, you can stick around, do whatever you want, but you have no connection to the city anymore. Nobody particularly wants you here, but they're also not going to remove you. You just get to float around all day. And eventually, you'll crash and you'll, eat again, sit around some more. But most of us understand that that is not actual freedom. Even though they get to spend all day doing pretty much whatever they want, that is not a desirable life. So there's a first level of freedom, which is autonomy. This is what prisoners don't have, the freedom to just get up and walk around the city. But that's a level of freedom that you get it and you don't really have meaning because you have no obligations. The things that you think are keeping you from being free, the places you need to be, the people you need to talk to and be around, those aren't the things that are preventing your freedom. Those are the things that are keeping you grounded. So there's a second level of freedom, which is meaning. That's the freedom that comes from being a part of a community, being part of a family, a workplace where your presence is valued. But there's a third level of freedom that I think most of us don't really think about, and that is existential freedom. That is the kind of freedom where you no longer need to be needed. You no longer care about your autonomy because you are free from these thoughts entirely. And this is a kind of freedom that most people fear because it is borderline madness. This is the kind of freedom that this is the Buddha. This is the kind of freedom where you see a guy on the street and you think he must be insane because he's achieved a level of freedom where you can't even picture what's going on in his head. You can't picture his sense of time and his sense of the universe because that's a level of freedom that involves cutting out everything that makes us feel human. It's the kind of freedom that you get from being, insane. It's the guy who's walking down the street talking to himself. He is free, but that's also a kind of freedom where if you achieved it, you don't even know if they even enjoy it, because that's how free they are. So I think my point is, when we think about freedom, it's not a visual thing. It's not a thing where you can picture a beach or you picture a big, Floyd Mayweather house, and that's going to feel free, because freedom is not merely it's not merely where you are in the physical world. It's not about looking around your surroundings and, nice weather. Real freedom is something that it's about connection. It's not just about where you are, it's about who you are.